Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am doing part 1 of 2 of my updated favourite fantasy characters list. Damn, that's a mouthful. I was like rehearsing that in my head, really praying that I wouldn't get it wrong, and thankfully I didn't. So there we have it. So I'm breaking this video up into 2 parts because I have 21 characters. 21 characters that have made this list. I think last time I only did 10. So my gosh, has this list grown, but it is what it is. We're just gonna go with it. Now, I've tried to pick up a quote from every single character, but for a few characters that just hasn't been possible because I haven't been able to find the quote that I wanted to get. And obviously I'm in a different country right now, so I don't have all my books next to me. I think for most of them I do have quotes, but for some of them I don't, which is very annoying. But like I said, we'll just go with it. Now, before I jump into my top 21 characters, don't ask me why 21. I guess I just couldn't get rid of one, but there you go. We'll go through some honorable mentions because, I don't know, I feel like we need to do some honorable mentions. So first honorable mention is Veridus from The Faithful and the Fallen. Now, I really liked Veridus. Veridus was a really interesting character because, you know, he was the best friend of one of the kind of main people in the prophecy at the start of the series, and you feel very conflicted about. He's kind of the voice of reason and he's the moral compass, in my opinion. You want him to do what's right, but you also feel really bad for him because he's also in a really awkward situation with his mate. Veridus' struggle is one that I identified with. You know, when you see someone who you really love and you really care about do something that is maybe a bit questionable, and you don't know what to do about it. I feel like we've all been in that situation. I think Veridus is somebody that I identified with because of that, and I liked his arc by the end of the series. So Veridus gets a shout out. The next one is Salaminus from the Salaminus trilogy by KJ Parker. Now, Salaminus is great. I believe he is based on Leonardo da Vinci. I would be extremely surprised if he wasn't based on Leonardo da Vinci, because he's a polymath, he can do everything, he's super talented, he's an engineer, he's a chemist, he's an artist, he's a philosopher, like he can do everything. Da Vinci is my favorite historical figure, or one of my favorite historical figures, and so when I started reading the Salaminus trilogy, I was like, oh, this is Da Vinci, and it was such a good version of Da Vinci because he's so sarcastic. He's got this really dark humor, this very typical British humor, which Parker does so well. I mean, he's British himself, and that humor is my humor. So I just found myself chuckling along to these little ditties by Salaminus, and that's why he gets an honorable mention, because he's just so fun. I would love to have like a coffee with him. I don't drink coffee, so it'd be a glass of water with him because I think it'd be so much fun. Next we have Jorg from the Broken Empire trilogy. Jorg is a very conflicting character, and he's one of those characters that I didn't understand until I finished the trilogy. He is awful, but there is a reason for his awfulness, and that's all I'm going to say. Next on my list is Marty from Long Price Quartet. I really like Marty. I really liked his character development. I really liked how he really embraced being a leader. I really liked how he introspected about the difficulties of being a leader, especially in the 3rd and the 4th book. And I just really identified with him in a lot of ways. And I think he summarizes that dilemma of wanting to be respected, but also wanting to be liked in a really effective manner. To this day, he is a character that I still think about. All right, so we're going to do numbers 21 to 11. And then I'll do a second part, which will be 10 to 1, obviously. In 21st place, we have Colonel Mustang from Full Metal Alchemist by Hiromi Arakawa. Full Metal Alchemist is great. And I honestly can't believe I have a manga character in my top 21 list. It's pretty crazy because bear in mind, this time last year, I had zero intention of ever reading manga. Mustang is amazing because he is a trooper and he's willing to do the things that nobody else is willing to do. And I really respect that in people. And I really respect that in my characters. I identify with Mustang in some ways. I think he pushes certain moral and ethical boundaries. I haven't read tons of Full Metal Alchemist. I've read up to like I think I'm up to volume 10. But the fact that even just within 10 volumes, he's already made such an impact on me is a really good sign, because I think he's just going to continue to develop into a really ferocious leader that I'm really looking forward to witness. Now, I've picked 2 quotes for Colonel Mustang. And without further ado, let's read them. So the first quote: "Nothing's perfect. The world's not perfect, but it's there for us, trying the best it can. That's what makes it so damn beautiful." Second quote: "Any man who has the brains to think and the nerve to act for the benefit of the people of the country is considered a radical by those who are content with stagnation and willing to endure disaster." Such a good quote. It's one of my favorite books from Fullmetal Alchemist today. It's just so good. Oh, I forgot to mention that this is a new entry from last year. I will mention which ones are new entries and which ones are people who are still like in the top list. But obviously this is expanded from last year, so we'll make it work. But Colonel Mustang is a new entry. All right, next in my list, we have another new entry, and that is in 20th place, we have Vasher and Nightblood from Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I love Warbreaker. It is so good. It is, in my opinion, one of two of Brandon Sanderson's best works. Just so good. The character work in that book is just breathtaking. And I just wish every single one of his books was like that. Not that I'm saying his other books are bad, they're not, but they're just not necessarily my cup of tea. But Warbreaker is almost perfect. In fact, I think it's just perfect. Now, the reason why I love Vasher is that he's this trope that I really enjoy. He's the kind of typical alpha male, a warrior, and he has a really checkered past. He kind of pushes the moral and ethical boundaries that, you know, we all push now and then, but these characters tend to push it to like another level where you're like, oh, this is like uncomfortable. But there is a layer to him, or there's layers to him, that as the book progresses and as we get to know him more, we start to peel back those layers and really understand who this person is, why they are the way they are, and, you know, their history. And I love those types of characters. I've said this before, I just love it. They are my favorite types of characters to read, and Vasher is the perfect example of that. I also love Vasher's relationship with Nightblood, which is his sword, which is a sentient object. It's a sentient sword, so they speak to each other in his mind, and the dialogue between them is really witty and it just flows really well. And they were my favorite bits. When we follow Vasher's perspective, oh, they were just so good. I wish we could just have a whole book about him, because I think he's such a fantastic character. And as for the quote, here we go. "Every man is a hero in his own story, princess. Murderers don't believe that they're to blame for what they do. Thieves, they think they deserve the money they take. Dictators, they believe they have the right, for the safety of their people and the good of the nation, to do whatever they wish." So good. All right, in 19th place, so this is actually an old entry, but he's just moved down the list, and that is Vimes from the City Watch collection by Terry Pratchett. Now, I've only read one book in the City Watch collection. I have the next 2 or 3, but the fact that, you know, I've only read one book with him in it is a very good sign, because Vimes, I think, is the representation of almost like absolute good, but then what happens when absolute good starts to go a little bit haywire, right? Like, people have good intentions, but then do those good intentions always lead to good actions? That's the question. Vimes is somebody that I like also because I'd like to think that if I was in a similar situation to him, I would do the same stuff, because he's a really good person. And I just really enjoy his kind of philosophical outlook on life. And I think he's one of those characters that he would be like a really good ruler. And I use the word ruler specifically, not leader, because he already is a leader. But I think he would make a really good ruler, but he would never do it because he would be worried it would corrupt him, if you know what I mean. So I love him for that reason. He has so much integrity, but there's moments where that integrity start to potentially not work in a way that you would expect with somebody like him, if you get my drift. And then the quote that I picked is this one. "One of the things forgotten about the human spirit is that while it is, in the right conditions, noble and brave and wonderful, it is also, when you get right down to it, only human." So good. All right, in 18th place, so we have a character from my list last year. So this is an old entry that has moved down the list, and that is Severus Snape from the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling in 18th place. Now, Severus Snape is one of the most tragic characters I have ever read. You know, he had the most thankless job in the world. He was public enemy number 1. He did everything to ultimately protect the son of the woman that he loved. and he really cared about and he treasured, who he could never be with. Even just thinking about him, it makes me sad because he never really got a chance to redeem himself. He never really got a chance to speak up for himself. And even though we find out that he had honorable intentions, it doesn't make it any better in my opinion. It just makes it even more tragic. But I love Snape because I think he's one of those characters that shows you that not everything is just on the surface. There's a lot of nuance, and that you should, you know, maybe think about people's motivations before you start jumping to conclusions. We live in a world right now where like nuance doesn't exist, and I implore you all to just, you know, think for yourself and like not always take at face value what you see on the news or on social media, because my gosh, is it toxic, and I have a really bad feeling it's going to get even worse. But anyway, I'm detracting. The point is that Snape represents somebody who is inherently a good person but is presented in a really bad way, even though he's actually really good. I don't know if that was very eloquent the way that I just said that, but I think you'll get where I'm going with this. As for the quote, there was a long pause, and slowly Snape regained control of himself, mastered his own breathing. At last he said, "Very well, but never, never tell Dumbledore. This must be between us. Swear it. I cannot bear it, especially Potter's son. I want your word." "My word, Severus, that I shall never reveal the best of you," Dumbledore sighed, looking down into Snape's ferocious, anguished face. "If you insist." Oh, makes me so sad. All right, next. Oh, sorry if I knocked the mic. Next, in 17th place, this is a new entry. We have Izumi from Fullmetal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. Sorry if I've butchered the name. Izumi is amazing. I love Izumi. As soon as the first time we come across her, I fell in love with her. She is fantastic. She's just totally like, she just doesn't care what anybody thinks. She's a teacher. She's honest. She's got integrity. And she's brutal. Don't get me wrong. She's pretty intense, but in a good way, like in a really, really positive way. And she's the sort of teacher that I would like. I'd like to think that if I was a teacher, I'd be like her. Maybe not as crazy, but I wouldn't be against it if I was as crazy as her. But she's just fantastic because she really pushes Ed and Alphonse in ways that we don't really fully understand until later volumes. And I think she's like the ultimate mentor figure, and I just love her for that reason. And there's a really touching kind of side story about her in some of the later volumes that I'm not going to go into because I don't want to spoil it, that I was not expecting, and it really touched me in a way that, I mean, it still stuck with me, right? I still think about it, and it showed a vulnerability, a rawness to her character that I just think was perfectly executed, and I hope we get more exploration of that in the later volumes, because I have a feeling it will, but it was just so phenomenally done. And as for the quote, "Believe in yourselves and choose life over death. Otherwise, you've led a shameful existence." See? Who else would say that? Like, it's such a good line. All right, next, in 16th place, this is also a new entry. We have Siri from Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Siri is a great character. She's your like typical misfit, doesn't really belong. She's the one that's kind of always been neglected, and everyone kind of just leaves her to her own devices because she's just, you know, she's a bit of a spare part, you know. I think we can all identify with Siri in a way, maybe, because she starts out as this misfit who doesn't really have a place. And by the end of Warbreaker, she's totally killing it. And like, she's very resourceful, and she's very, you know, she uses her initiative. She's very good at building relationships and connections, which is a really difficult skill in my opinion. There's a vulnerability to Siri that I really liked when, you know, we kind of get her take on her father favoring her older sister, who is essentially the one who's kind of like a bit of a political pawn. And while I feel sorry for her, I'm glad it happened to her, because it allowed her to step up in a way that really turns her into this kind of ferocious woman later on in the book. And I'm here for it. I'm here for those types of characters, especially when it's a female character, when they're maybe a little bit immature, or they're a little bit, you know, they don't really know what they're doing, they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. But then by the end of the story, you know, they've really kind of found their place in society, they found their place in the world that they're in. And Siri definitely does that. And I think she's one of those characters that has stuck with me because she reminds me of myself a little bit. and I think a lot of people will be able to identify with her. I don't actually have a quote because, like I said, I don't have my copy of Warbreaker with me, and I couldn't find a quote from her that I really liked online, so I'd rather just keep it empty. All right, next we have Adria Ripoli from A Brightness Long Ago by Guy Gavriel Kay. Now this is also a new entry in 15th place. I really liked Adria, really reminded me of myself. She's a very strong, independent, very passionate young woman who doesn't want to just do what society wants her to do, which is marry a rich man, or if not that, then go into a life of religious servitude, which she doesn't want to do. And so she makes her own path. She uses her own initiative to make her own path, and she's unapologetic about it, and I love it. You'll see a common theme of the female characters that I like. They all tend to have this kind of rebellious streak. You know, she does what she needs to do, and I totally respect that. I unfortunately don't have a quote because I couldn't find a quote that I really liked from her, but just take my word for it. I've gushed about this book so many times on my channel now that you should just go read it. All right, we've got a few more. We've got 4 more, and this video is going on for ages, so let's try and get through these a little bit quicker. So in 14th place, this character was on my list last year but obviously moved down, and that is Sazed from the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. Sazed is wonderful, and he's a character that I still think about because he represents honesty, integrity, intelligence, curiosity. He's the type of guy that you'd want as your right hand, because if I was like a ruler, I would want him to be my right hand, because you know he would be diplomatic, you know he would be impartial, you know he would present the facts as is, and then if you wanted his opinion, he would give you his opinion based on the facts and the data. And he just talks a lot of sense, and I really loved his struggle, his inner struggle that he goes through in the later books with religion and identity, because I've been through that myself, and so it was something that I could really identify with. And then the way that his character develops by the end of the trilogy is just so fitting for Sazed. Like, it's the perfect ending for Sazed, and I couldn't have imagined anything different for him. So without further ado, I am going to read my favorite quote, and that is, "Men are more resilient than that, I think. Our belief is often strongest when it should be weakest. That is the nature of hope." I wish Sazed was my friend. All right, next. We have, and this is a new entry, we have Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Sam. Literally the best character ever. Well, one of the best characters ever. One of the biggest compliments I ever received from my best friend was that I was like Sam. One of my brothers also said this as well. It was like, "You're like Sam." And I was just like, oh my God, it's literally the best compliment anybody could have ever given me. Because Sam is the purest soul you could ever meet. He is a good person through and through. And he is just honorable. He is a man of values. He is a man of strength, but like a different type of strength. You know, he's not strong in terms of like Aragorn, but he's got inner strength, he's got mental strength, and I just adore Sam. And the way that he is basically the hero of the book is just like, it's just so good. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Sam. It's like literally one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's a little bit long, but it deserves it, and so I'm gonna read it now. "I know, it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something." And I think that's a really good quote to just read every morning, especially in the world that we live in these days. It can be a pretty dark place at times, and that's one of those quotes that gets me through it. Absolutely beautiful. All right, in 12th place, we've got 2 more. In 12th place, we have Idan from Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. Idan. Oh, another character that I really identify with. I identify with all these characters, to be honest, in some way, shape or form. But Idan, super headstrong, very opinionated, knows what she wants, knows how she wants to do what she wants to do. And I respect that, even if it's not always the right thing necessarily. I loved her character because I'd never read a fantasy character, a female fantasy character, that felt so real and raw and just unfiltered. I think a lot of people would say that she is a villain, at least at the start. But I think there's a lot more nuance to her, and I think you begin to realize that she is a very neglected individual who didn't have a lot of people around her that cared about her. And that's why she is the way she is, and that's why she makes some of the decisions that she makes, because she doesn't really know what the meaning of family is, at least until the later books. Idan is wonderful, a very, very complex character. She's so multi-layered. I unfortunately don't have a quote for her because, again, I couldn't really find one that I like, and I don't have my book with me. So just take my word for it. All right, and then in 11th place, so this is the final one for this video, we have Ali from the David trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty, which was in my original list. I think he was in my top 6 or 7, but he's obviously now moved down a couple of places. I love Ali because Ali's struggle is one of someone who is a person of faith, and like intensely a person of faith. And he goes through the struggle of trying to understand how bad things can happen when you believe in whatever you may believe in. And he just goes through this battle of trying to really understand whether religion ever really makes sense, or whether it ever really justifies the extremes that it can sometimes, you know, deliver. He's a character that I really enjoyed because he's also just really kind, and I think he's a really good person and he means well, but he gets carried away, and he means really well, but he gets carried away sometimes because of this firm belief that he has in his faith. The really great thing is, by the end of the trilogy, he still has his faith. I really hate it when that happens, you know, when like there's a person of like strong religious faith at the start and then they just all of a sudden like no longer believe in their faith. I really hate that trope, and I think Chakraborty did a really good job of showing somebody who just became much more aware of the limitations associated with their faith, I guess. Well, it was a really wonderful exploration of that, and I didn't expect it when I read it, and it stuck in my head for a very long time. I honestly wanted to try and get him into my top 10, but I couldn't fit him in, so it is what it is. But my favorite quote from him, I have so many quotes from him that I love, but this is my favorite one. No, I wasn't afraid. I was tired. Ali's voice broke on the word. I'm tired of everyone in this city feeding on vengeance. I'm tired of teaching our children to hate and fear other children because their parents are our enemies. And I'm sick and tired of acting like the only way to save our people is to cut down all who might oppose us, as if our enemies won't return the favor the instant power shifts. Oh, so good. All right, there we go. So that's 11 to 21 done. I wonder if you guys have any guesses for who are going to be in my top 10. It's an interesting list. It's a good mix, I think. And I think there's some pretty obvious ones in there, obviously. But yeah, I'm curious to see if you guys predict any. And let me know, are any of these characters on your list? Are there any that I haven't mentioned that are on your list? I'm always really curious about these types of videos because I really love hearing like what types of characters people connect with. So definitely comment down below and we'll take the conversation there. Hope you enjoyed this video. Look out for part 1, which will probably come out not too long after this. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that one. Stay safe, everybody. Take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.